Captain America: The First Avenger, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and Captain America: Civil War. The Captain America franchise has established itself as one of the crown jewels of Marvel Studios, and has helped reintroduce the world to a character that has been proven it's not just a product of its time. But now that the story of Steve Rogers has ended with Avengers Endgame and both Clint and Bucky carrying on his legacy in the upcoming Falcon and Winter Soldier series for Disney+, we now have time to view and reflect on the trilogy of movies we've received of the Star-Spangled Man with a Plan. But is it a proper movie trilogy? And if it's not, then how do we make it one? Let's find out. Captain America: The First Avenger was released July 22nd, 2011. Immediately disappointing a lot of us who expected a Captain America movie to be released closer to the 4th of July. It was written by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely and directed by Joe Johnston of The Rocketeer, just in case you were wondering why the movie felt a certain type of way when you watched it for the first time. As a matter of fact, it was The Rocketeer that landed Johnston the job of director, according to Kevin Feige. That, and being impressed with his special effects work on the original Star Wars trilogy. Because of that decision, Captain America: The First Avenger as a period piece felt just as fun and entertaining as an Indiana Jones movie, which was the goal. And along with bringing home a box office total of over $370 million worldwide on a budget between $140 and $218 million, it also marked the first time Marvel Studios tapped the shoulder of an actor that previously portrayed a Marvel superhero for another studio, in the form of Chris Evans, portraying Steve Rogers after playing Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, for Fantastic Four and Rise of the Silver Surfer over at 20th Century Fox. Captain America: The Winter Soldier was released April 4th, 2014, 3 months before Independence Day. Once again written by Marcus and McFeely, this time Steve's first solo adventure in the modern world was helmed by Anthony and Joe Russo, who won the gig after acclaimed director F. Gary Gray removed himself from the shortlist in order to direct Straight Outta Compton instead. Treating the movie as, like Feige likes to call it, a 70s espionage movie masquerading as a superhero film, just as The First Avenger did with emulating a World War II piece, and taking a more grounded approach to a lot of the references that were made in the Captain America comics that inspired it, such as the depiction of Arnim Zola upon the reveal of his character as the main antagonist. The Winter Soldier paid off tremendously, both narrative-wise and box office-wise, bringing in over $700 million worldwide with a budget of under $180 million. And considering what the first Avengers movie foreshadowed was to come in the future, a third Captain America movie during Phase 3 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe was, and please forgive my choice of words, inevitable. And just like Captain America: The Winter Soldier was named and loosely adapted from a Captain America storyline in Marvel Comics written by Ed Brubaker, Captain America: Civil War was named and loosely adapted from a Marvel Universe event storyline written by my arch nemesis, Mark Millar. Once again written by Marcus and McFeely, and once again directed by the Russo brothers, this film marks the final solo Steve Rogers Captain America movie before Kevin Feige and Chris Evans mutually agreed to retire the character at the end of Avengers Endgame, and marking it the second completed trilogy by Marvel Studios, with the first one being Iron Man. But as you know, for those of you who have seen Civil War, there's a lot to comb through in order to see if there's something there to properly tie it to the first Avengers in order to count the whole as a proper movie trilogy. And if I'm going to succeed at this, I'm going to need some help. Readers, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to all of you Nando of Nando v Movies. Thanks for doing this with me, man.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm just glad I'm able to contribute something to this, and the fact that we both have whiteboards makes this bit work.
Yeah, me too. They really come in handy.
Whiteboards always come in handy. So what do we do first?
Well, the first thing we have to do is take a look at Captain America Civil War and see if we can find a strong enough connection to the First Avenger that warrants the whole being proclaimed a proper movie trilogy.
And if we don't find one in Civil War?
Well, then we find one in the First Avenger that can work with the DNA of the movie and restructure Civil War in order to make it one.
Oh, you had me at restructure Civil War.
I knew there was something I liked about you. Those who have watched me over the years already know my opinion on Captain America Civil War. Because of how Joss Whedon had things go with the way he depicted Steve and Tony's relationship within the first two Avengers movies, that had to be incorporated into the story because of the MCU's continuity, I don't really blame the Russo brothers that much for why I don't really care for it, outside of how I felt it was a Captain America movie by name alone.
I'm not going to pretend it doesn't have problems. I think Civil War shows up at a weird time in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I don't think the repercussions of Civil War last for very long, not even within Civil War the movie. Like, everybody's already out of jail at the end of the movie, so it's kind of like, what did we do here? But I do think the movie itself is insanely watchable. It's one of my favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. I think it's really funny, and it's got a great heart, and it's got some of my favorite action sequences. The opening action scene in Laos is a lot of fun. The chase with Bucky, Black Panther, and Cap is great. The fight at the end between Cap, Iron Man, and Bucky is awesome. And then obviously the airport fight may be one of the best superhero fights ever put to screen. It is so much fun. So I do really enjoy Captain America Civil War.
Well, I'll definitely give you the heart bit for sure. Even though I think they could have been better placed and adjusted who did what for a better sense of gravitas, there were a lot of moments within Civil War that I enjoyed the delivery of. The funeral of Peggy Carter, for example. And while it was kinda impossible to achieve it, considering what they were adapting, and thankfully very loosely at that, I just wish that they took those moments that screamed Captain America and put it in a plot that did a better job at making him the focus. And it wasn't as if Marvel Studios didn't think Captain America could hold his own movie anymore either. Despite Black Widow's role in it, that point was clearly made with the Russo brothers' Winter Soldier, which was definitely the better movie in my opinion. Even more so with Joe Johnston's The First Avenger having the World War II period to play around with that specifically has Steve all to himself in order to properly make one. If anything, because of the circumstances before it, and the green light of Marvel Studios' deal with Sony, Captain America Civil War fell into the same trap as Iron Man 2 did when it came to using the movie as an outlet to foreshadow future projects for the company, as opposed to a proper follow-up for the character. Only in Civil War's case, it was less about future projects and more about incorporating moments from a multi-character featuring comic book event into a movie that was only meant to focus on one character and those usually immediately associated with him.
Civil War had the aftermath of Avengers Age of Ultron to deal with. The introduction of the Sokovia Accords that called for superheroes to answer to the government as opposed to working independently caused a divide between two heroes specifically. Tony, who supported the Accords because of his guilt for creating Ultron, the AI responsible for all of this mess, and then Steve, who just got done with his stint as a S.H.I.E.L.D. turned Hydra member in Winter Soldier and doesn't really trust the government.
Throw in Helmut Zemo framing Bucky Barnes and sending Tony and Steve on a wild goose chase regarding more sleeper Winter Soldier units in order to fundamentally break the Avengers and get revenge on the death of his family in Sokovia during the Ultron attack, and you just have a mess. An organized mess, but a mess nonetheless. But we're not at the point of the video where we're pretending to be Marie Kondo yet. Right now, we have to look at what Civil War did regarding its storytelling and see if it qualifies the Captain America franchise as a whole as a proper movie trilogy. The answer, as you can imagine, is no. Remember, readers, the main rule in creating a proper trilogy, movie or otherwise, is that there has to be an element of the first installment's plot that plays a significant role in the third in a way that makes all three films or books or whatever work together as one cohesive story. From there, you can use the third installment to reveal new information about what's being carried over from the first and expand upon it in various ways, the most common form being a plot twist. Now, it was probably out of respect for Joe Johnston that they didn't reference the First Avenger any more than what was absolutely necessary. But outside of Age of Ultron, Civil War only ever refers to the events of the only other Captain America movie directed by the Russo brothers, The Winter Soldier. Instead of taking an element originally placed in the First Avenger and expanding upon it in Civil War, it merely acts as a continuation of Winter Soldier that is forced to incorporate elements of the events of Age of Ultron that either the Russos or Marvel Studios felt needed a sense of resolution before Infinity War and Endgame came along.
I think Civil War had a lot on its plate. It had to deal with the arcs of so many of these characters, and they all couldn't tie in directly to the First Avenger. That's not the movie's fault necessarily. A lot of it has to do with what it needed to accomplish before Infinity War, some characters it needed to introduce, and just the general kind of momentum of the Marvel Cinematic Universe up until that point. But besides Bucky, who is clearly a thread and has an emotional arc that ends in Civil War, and I mean, it doesn't completely end in Civil War, because obviously we're going to see more of him, but the Steve and Bucky relationship definitely continues, but beyond that, there isn't too much that the First Avenger starts that Civil War finishes.
Which is a bit of a shame, considering that Helmut Zemo, the modern-day version of Baron Zemo, one of Cap's most prominent villains in his rogues gallery since the Red Skull, is the main antagonist and can easily have his family line linked somewhere down the line in Steve Rogers' past. But writers Marcus and McFeely don't really take advantage of it. Wait a minute. Zemo. Steve Rogers' past. Nando, are you pondering what I'm pondering?
I think so, Laurent. But if we're to pull something like that off, how would we be able to make it work?
Well then, let's go back to the First Avenger and find a thread that's strong enough to make it work. I think it's safe to say that, considering his track record, Joe Johnston was the perfect guy to direct Captain America: The First Avenger. In my opinion, only the director of The Rocketeer could find a way to give Steve Rogers' World War II adventures the fun and maturity of Indiana Jones and emulate the core feeling of superhero films that was sparked by Richard Donner's 1978 Superman the Movie. And also, in my opinion, a lot of the Richard Donner Superman aspect had to do with the use of the creator of the Super Soldier Serum, Dr. Abraham Erskine, played brilliantly by Stanley Tucci. Erskine did with the First Avenger what Glenn Ford's Jonathan Kent did with Superman the Movie, with one slight difference between the two. While Jonathan instilled the morals and virtues in Clark that would later on influence how he would use his abilities for good, Erskine already saw them in Rogers before the procedure that turned him into Captain America. As the creator of the Super Soldier Serum and one seeking redemption for giving the world the Red Skull in the form of perfecting it, he seeks someone already with the moral aptitude and spirit and urges them to stay true to who they are.
The serum amplifies everything that is inside, so good becomes great, bad becomes worse.
That's why, despite his limited amount of screen time, you really feel it when Erskine dies. He may have accomplished what he sought to accomplish when he sees how Steve came out of the chamber, and for all we know, that might be all that was necessary for him to receive his redemption, but the look on Steve's face when he's watching Erskine die and points at his heart speaks volumes. It also reveals something very interesting.
In the narrative, all we know about Erskine is that he created the Super Soldier Serum, allowed Johann Schmidt to take an unfinished version of it, who then became the Red Skull as a result, retreated to America to perfect it, and chose Steve Rogers because of his natural want to do good. But that's all we know. Some might say that's enough to get to the root of the matter and progress the story, which it is, I'm not going to deny that. But then you have to consider that in the MCU, the American government has been trying to reproduce Erskine's work in various ways since his death and Steve's disappearance at the end of the movie. Because of this, not only could more about Erskine afford to be explored in Civil War, but also more about the Super Soldier Serum in general, especially now that more legacy characters from Marvel's rosters have come into play. Things like what caused Hitler to order Erskine to create the serum in the first place? What was it made of? Did Erskine create it alone, or did he have a partner?
Yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down, but we're going to have to do a lot of restructuring to make this work.
Oh, that ain't no problem. As long as you're up to the challenge, that is.
Oh, I live for this. And Speed Racer, the movie Cats, and the New Orleans Saints, but definitely this.
Great. Then let's break it down for you. In Captain America, the First Avenger, we learn how Erskine's Super Soldier Serum works in regards to physically manifesting the morality of the user, and that he was the only person who knew how to replicate it in a way that doesn't turn people into either Hulk or Abomination.
In Captain America Civil War, Helmut Zemo is only Zemo in name, and seeks more to bring about the end of the Avengers rather than to be a villain for Steve Rogers.
So, let's give Zemo back to Captain America and associate him with both Erskine and the Super Soldier Serum in order to get him more in touch with his comic book counterpart than how Civil War initially depicted him. The way we would do this would be to reveal that Erskine was not the only scientist to create the Super Soldier Serum. He had a partner, one who created the prototype of the serum that was taken by Johann Schmidt that transformed him into the Red Skull before Erskine escaped Nazi Germany with the formula and perfected it for the United States. That person was Baron Heinrich Zemo, Helmut's great-grandfather.
Because of what the formula did to Red Skull, the Zemo name and bloodline became disgraced amongst Germany, and Heinrich was the first punished by Johann under his new visage. By the time he was ready to eliminate Erskine, however, he'd already escaped to America, and he didn't show up on Schmidt's radar again until Erskine found a perfect candidate for his perfected version of the formula in Steve Rogers, thus giving Zemo a motive that's a common theme in third installments like this, but one that Captain America never really takes advantage of: attacking Steve's legacy.
Meanwhile, word of Erskine's treachery was passed down through generations of what remained of the Zemo bloodline, with American propaganda of Captain America during the Second World War as their proof. Even more so during the 70 years he was missing in action. By the time he reappeared during the Battle of New York upon the formation of the Avengers, Heinrich's great-grandson Helmut had become obsessed with restoring the Zemo family name and bringing down the country that took in Erskine. However, it wasn't until he saw that the first and only product of Erskine's tampering of Helmut's family formula was up and running again that he knew how he wanted to execute it.
You see, while revenge is definitely one of the factors we're keeping from the original version of Civil War's Zemo, we're really reshaping it and expanding upon it. Zemo doesn't seek revenge against the Avengers because of the role they played in the death of his family in Sokovia during Age of Ultron. He seeks to expose all of America as the selfish, hypocritical entity that he believes they truly are. He wants to separate the Star-Spangled Man from his immediate support network and destroy him from the inside out by pouring salt in the wound Steve refuses to let heal: his inability to let go of Bucky Barnes.
Doing this makes Zemo a hybrid of Bane from Batman Nightfall and Joker from The Dark Knight in this regard. He still has a need of revenge against America and the idol that they created for themselves with the stolen work of his great-grandfather. So, like the Joker, he wants to prove that
when the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other.
And in proving his point, even within the ranks of Earth's mightiest heroes, like Bane, he will wear Steve down until he has no one left to help him.
Then I will break you.
Now remember, the point of a proper movie trilogy isn't to just completely remake the third movie. It's to restructure things in a way that may fix problems within the third movie, but also allows a prominent thread from the first movie to be expanded upon in the third's narrative first and foremost. With that being said, we have to reorganize a few things within the original narrative in order for this new version of Civil War to still have the DNA of Civil War, but also veto a few things in order to properly interweave the thread of the First Avenger into its narrative. And one of the main things we have to do in order to fit both of these criteria is that we have to get rid of the Sokovia Accords.
The first thing we need to do to accomplish that is to explore how Zemo goes about putting the nation against Steve and Bucky. Playing into his strengths as a master tactician, Zemo would use Bucky's actions as the Winter Soldier over the course of his years under S.H.I.E.L.D./Hydra control in order to force America into a manhunt for him. He does this by exposing Bucky, and I guess probably a list of his targets while he was brainwashed, as the latest, yet still incredibly dangerous loss that America has taken and mistake that America has made during Steve's 70-year nap, in an attempt to show other world leaders just how much the free world has fallen in credibility. By allowing Bucky to roam free, the country continues to be this selfish, hypocritical, husk of its former self that it's been since, the Kennedy administration. The government takes the bait, because of course they do. We can use Ross as the avatar for that, and the hunt for Bucky is on. And because Steve refuses to hunt Bucky down, even seen helping Bucky by the American media, the scion of the nation has been tarnished, and thus has been proclaimed a traitor.
On the Avengers side, the manhunt for Bucky is led by Tony Stark, because two of the targets Zemo revealed that Bucky eliminated in the past were his parents. And now that he's isolated from both of his support networks that are his fellow Avengers and the very country, Steve, with Bucky and more than likely Sam, have to form their own team to counteract Tony's, whose new view of Steve has strayed once it's revealed that Steve knew Bucky was the one responsible for his parents' deaths but never told him, in order to find, stop, and figure out the motive of Zemo now that he's being hunted by both the American government and his fellow Avengers, unknowingly playing right into Zemo's hands. And while there will be hints and clues placed over the course of the movie that recall certain events of the First Avenger, Steve will eventually find said motive of Zemo's via new information about Erskine's past decisions and the role the Zemo family played in creating the Super Soldier Serum. And while it will make Rogers realize why Zemo was targeting him, the revelation might also have him question what he initially knew about Erskine when he chose Steve for the program, and, as a result, have him question the state of the country he loves so much and everything they've done since he crashed Red Skull's bomber in the Himalayas all those years ago, especially after having to deal with the ramifications of how easy it was for Hydra to take over S.H.I.E.L.D. after capturing Zola. All of this factoring into his decision of refusing to give up Bucky would weigh on Steve's psyche and resolve, factoring into Zemo's Bane-like tactics to break Cap once and for all. Now, because we won't be using the Sokovia Accords in this version of Civil War, and instead using what was recently stated, we have to reorganize a few things within the narrative and present new reasons for certain characters to be there in order for this new version of Civil War to still have the DNA of the movie that we actually received. And this means we have to address the Scarlet Witch in the room. Nando?
Wanda. She's the catalyst for all of the actions of the original Civil War, when she attempts to contain but then accidentally raises the Crossbones explosion in Laos, killing innocent civilians. And I think Civil War also has this issue, the Sokovia Accords plot, should well-meaning superheroes face consequences / oversight, is immediately sidelined by the Bucky plot. should Cap's friend face consequences for his past mind-controlled actions and some things he was recently framed for. Like, you take the Sokovia Accords out of the picture, and it's the same movie. Bucky is the catalyst for the action. After the Winter Soldier, Bucky goes on the run with some of his memory restored, but the S.H.I.E.L.D. Hydra info dump put his role in the past events into the spotlight and causes a worldwide manhunt, which Zemo can exploit. But, so if there isn't any explosion, what is Wanda gonna do in this movie? Like, where does she end up after Age of Ultron? Easy. She goes directly to jail. Do not pass go, do not collect $200, because while like it's nice that Wanda gets to pose with the new Avengers at the end of Age of Ultron, it's weird that she's allowed to. Like, sure, she turned on the killer robot, but only after she helped him get what he needed and almost kill everyone. So let's have a penitent Wanda accept her sentence. She has a debt she needs to pay to society and goes to prison for some time. That way, when Steve is desperate and Tony is closing in on him, Steve recruiting Wanda is a way bigger line he's crossing. Breaking an international criminal out of jail specifically because he's going to need a powerhouse to deal with Vision.
And now, let's address the new way we use T'Challa. T'Challa's new role in this version of Civil War is definitely still an important one, despite not using the UN hearing to generate his origin story. T'Challa is present because, after seeing the Avengers in action and gathering enough proof themselves, his father, King T'Chaka, sent him to America, more specifically the United Nations headquarters, in order to seek justice, claiming that the United States created the Super Soldier Serum with an ingredient smuggled from Wakanda over 80 years ago. The heart-shaped herb responsible for granting the monarchy the abilities of the Black Panther. It's through this revelation about the serum's creation that we learn a bit more about Erskine and the foreshadowing of Baron Zemo's involvement, starting Steve down the road of discovering the truth about it. This fact is proven to be true amongst the multiple of things Zemo reveals about the country in order to start the manhunt for Bucky, and T'Challa sees Steve's actions and resolves as revolting, considering who Steve is supposed to be and represent to his nation, since, as a prince of Wakanda, he himself is a man who knows what it means to put his home and people first.
He involves himself in the hunt for Steve and Bucky as the Black Panther, first and foremost to help America get a handle on this crisis so that they can properly focus on what he's there for, to have the nation answer for their theft of the Wakandan herb during the Second World War. Then, being unsatisfied with the progress that the government has made in tracking him down, T'Challa joins Tony Stark in finding Steve and Bucky, assuming that his former Avengers would be better at finding and stopping Steve than just some government agents.
When it comes to his role in the final fight between Cap and Zemo, however, because there is going to be a final fight between Cap and Zemo in this one, purple mask and all, T'Challa is a slightly altered version of his OG Civil War counterpart. It probably wouldn't happen at the Siberian Hydra base this time around, probably where Erskine and Baron Zemo initially birthed the idea of the serum, so probably somewhere in Germany. However, he still doesn't physically involve himself in the conflict of the final act, but he and a media crew are definitely present. But instead of witnessing a Zemo about to commit suicide, he sees something else. He sees Steve beat Zemo at his own game. Then and there, he's able to figure out exactly what Zemo's game is, and gains a newfound respect for his decision to represent the spirit of America, despite America straying far away from what that spirit is. Satisfied that Steve is the only product of the heart-shaped herb outside of Wakandans once Zemo is locked away, T'Challa offers Steve and Bucky refuge in Wakanda now that he's gone nomad. Even offers some assistance in breaking out the majority of his Civil War team and undo the years of Hydra brainwashing on Bucky. And because there was no hearing attack to kill off T'Chaka, T'Challa's arc of becoming king of Wakanda can now properly happen in his solo Black Panther movie. Oh, right. That means we actually have to explain how that fight goes down. We have a worn-out Captain America, battle-damaged and shieldless after he and Bucky tag-teamed Tony earlier. And Zemo declares victory over both Steve and America by declaring that he has broken his spirit and showing the world that Steve is just as hypocritical and selfish as the nation he protects. But then, Steve does something completely unexpected. He tells Zemo that he's right. The America of today is not the same as the one that he believes in, the one that he knows has the potential of reaching one day. That's when he grabs the star on his chest that was recently damaged from his fight with Zemo and rips it off, disowning himself from the nation and beating Zemo at his own game.
You see, while his psychology and moral compass always aligned with what the nation is supposed to represent, Captain America was not a moniker that Steve gave himself. It was his merit and everything that made him who he was that made Erskine choose Steve for the project to begin with. And it's in Steve remembering what Erskine said the night before the procedure all those years ago about promising to never change and to stay a good man that made him realize this and know it's the key to beating Zemo.
Of course, he objects by trying to get Steve to weigh his options, stating how shitty Steve is going to feel when he has to fight his own countrymen. Then, as one last nod to the First Avenger, you can have Steve repeat what he told Erskine at his exam.
I don't like bullies. I don't care where they're from.
He tries it again. You'll be hunted for the rest of your life. The press will make a mockery of you. Your politicians will besmirch your name. Then, that's when Steve says, doesn't matter what the press says. Doesn't matter what the politicians or the mob say. Doesn't matter if the whole country decides that something wrong is something right.
This nation was founded on one principle above all else: the requirement that we stand up for what we believe, no matter the odds or consequences.
When the mob and the press and the whole world tell you to move, your job is to plant yourself like a tree beside the river of truth and tell the world, no, you move. I think it's fair to say that considering all of the creative liberties Marvel Studios took with the properties that bear the same name and premise as the stories they adapt, Civil War could have been altered in a way that still felt like the Civil War we received, but still felt like it was bringing Steve's story full circle, despite his later involvement in Infinity War and Endgame. And even the changes provided by Nando and I would still allow the future events of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and even Black Widow, to largely remain unchanged. Because at the end of the day, it's not the story's overall connection to the greater MCU that we're altering. It's changing how strong the story's connection to Captain America is, and as a result, making Steve's arc feel whole. A lot more whole than the initial version of Civil War left it. Because with the changes made by Nando and I truly believe that we'd give Steve Rogers not only a more well-rounded arc, but one that is definitely worthy of being proclaimed a proper movie trilogy. Hey, thanks again for helping me out with this, Nando. I really appreciate it.
Dude, no problem. Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. Oh, and I'm sorry for not using the whiteboard at all. It's more kind of window dressing.
Oh, don't worry about it. I barely used mine either. Wait. Sorry, I was gonna ask if you wanted to do this again later on, but the trilogy... You may not be up for the trilogy I have in mind.
Oh, come on. There is not a trilogy bad enough to scare me away from doing something like this, especially if it's a superhero movie.
Not even if it's the original X-Men trilogy?
Oh yeah. That. Yeah, I could probably do that. I'm not scared of the third X-Men movie, not just because it's full of dumb memes and weird particle effect CGI, and there's no good reason why I never mention it on my channel, even though I talk about the X-Men movies quite a bit, but call me, and we'll see, and, you know, we'll make something happen.
Will do, buddy. Break Nando's spirit. Done. So while you're waiting for us to make that masterpiece, if you want to see more of the two of us, you can head over to Nando's channel where I give a brief history about a certain DC character that makes an even briefer cameo in a DC movie. And that's all I'm going to say on the matter. Right now, you can stream the entire Captain America trilogy over on Disney Plus, because of course. But if you don't own them yet and want to help financially support the channel, I'll have affiliate links in the description down below. So with that being said, readers, your homework assignment for the day. Write in the comment section below what you think of Marvel Studios' Captain America trilogy if you've seen it. Or if you feel like sharing with the rest of the class, which trilogy from Marvel Studios I should cover next. Regardless of your answer, I'd love to know your thoughts. A Proper Movie Trilogy is brought to you thanks to my generous supporters over on Patreon. So if you like this video and you want to see more, you can join it by clicking the card at the end of the video or in the link in the description down below, where you can also find a link to my merchandise store. Or if you prefer to give a one-time donation, you can find links to my PayPal and my Ko-fi account in the description box as well. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because I post new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and every other Friday. But until then, this is Readus 101. Class dismissed.